Hey crafty people, it's Tasha here with another video for Heffy Doodle. Today I'm sharing some tips for colouring with alcohol markers and remaking this card that I actually made for the last release. I'll be using Cozy Kitty's Stamps and Coordinating die set. You Are So Awesome. One of the layers from Deckled Paper Hugs. Some plum pudding cardstock, alcohol marker cardstock, and I thought I might use a sparkle mix, but I didn't in the end. I'm starting with some of our alcohol marker friendly cardstock in my Misty stamping tool, and I'm laying out all of the images that I know I want for my card. Once I'm happy with how they're all sitting, I'm closing the lid to pick them all up, and then inking up with VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Now this isn't actually suitable for colouring with alcohol markers, but it's a pigment based ink and that takes a little longer to dry, so that makes it perfect for heat embossing. The embossing is going to capture and seal that ink, which means it doesn't come into contact with any of the alcohol ink, so no icky smudges. Now, embossing could potentially damage your marker tips. I've done this loads of times, I've had no issues, so it's just really up to you whether you want to take that risk. I'm adding Wow's clear gloss embossing powder from my giant tub, just sprinkling it all over those images, making sure that I have everything covered nicely before giving it a few good taps to knock off any excess. Now I've heated this up off camera and I'm bringing it to my images to fully melt them all. I'm using a cork board behind, which keeps my workspace protected from the heat, and it actually helps to evenly heat everything through too. Now let's get colouring. I've chosen groups of 2 to 4 shades for each colour that I'm going to use, so I've got a range from really light to kind of medium dark. I'm starting with 2 of my cats. I want to make them both appear white, but to make them look a little less flat, you still need to add some shadows. Now you can do this with any colour, but mainly I reach for grey. Having said that, I've got 2 different grey combinations to share today. This first cat is going to be cool toned greys. My second combination is warm greys. I'm doing exactly the same here, but you're going to get a slightly different look by switching cool for warm. It's just preference, but it's an easy way to have 2 white images that still look different. Either way, you want to leave the majority of your image white. Now for all these other images, I'm using the same technique. I like to add a base of my lightest shade first because I feel that helps the colours to blend, but if it's not a very large area, then I don't always bother with this step. Next, I'm adding my darkest shade into any of the areas where you have the most shadow, anywhere that 2 objects are touching each other, for example. I'm just putting a line of this darkest shade. Then I'm going in with my next shade, adding a slightly thicker line that overlaps my first one. Keep doing that, and then when I get to the lightest shade, I'm extending that colour out even more and softening any colour edges because I don't want any harsh lines remaining. Another way that I ensure I get nice colour is by using the right paper. This step is so important because bad paper can affect everything from the smoothness of your blending to the actual colour that you're going to get from the marker. Heffy Doodle's alcohol marker friendly cardstock is a great choice. I find that it takes a little longer for the ink to dry on this, which makes it really great for blending. Another option I like would be Nina Classic Crest Solar White in £80. Sometimes selecting colours can be a bit tricky, especially if you've got a lot of markers. I get a little bit overwhelmed by all the choices. So now I choose a limited colour palette to use on a project, and I just stick to that. Limiting the colours that you use really helps your entire project to feel more cohesive as well. There's some great resources online to help you choose colours that work well together too. Or sometimes if I see something that I particularly like the colours of, I'll grab a quick photo and store it in my phone, and I can use that as inspiration on future projects. Sometimes I feel like I'm missing a shade that would help me blend better, either because I don't have that one or because it's sitting in my needs to be refilled tub, which I swear I'll get to soon. So when that happens, I'll try to bridge the gap by borrowing a little pigment. I'm touching the tip of my lighter shade directly to the tip of my darker shade. A little of the ink will transfer over, and it gives you a small amount of a shade somewhere between the two. You don't need to worry, it doesn't harm your markers at all, and any colour that's left on there you can just scribble off onto some scrap paper and your marker will be good as new. Just a quick one, I mentioned my dry markers. If your marker is getting dry, it won't be able to deposit enough ink onto the paper to saturate it properly, and you'll be making your job 13 times harder. So make sure to replace or refill when you notice your markers getting dry. There's my tips for the colouring part, but I've got loads more left for completing the rest of the project. One extra thing I like to do is add some little white highlights using a gel pen. This is totally based on preference, and you can experiment with how and where you like yours to be. I don't really have any hard and fast rules, to be honest, about where I place them. I just go where the mood takes me. This panel of plum pudding will have another smaller panel on top, so I know that this centre area won't be seen, so I don't want to waste it. I'm cutting the shadow for my sentiment from the centre of that panel. Then I'll cut the words from some Nina £80 and also some double-sided adhesive foam. This will give my sentiment some lift and dimension. And I wanted to show you as well that I'm cutting the foam using my mini die cutting machine. It can totally handle this material and the die slices through beautifully. I'm peeling the release paper off the top and then adhering my white die cut into place. Next, I like to push out any of the extra foam bits between or inside my letters so that they don't get stuck to the sentiment as I remove it from the other backing paper. Then I'm sticking it into place onto that gorgeous purple shadow piece. I've die cut my images off camera, but I wanted to show you one of the mistakes I made. Make sure you tape your dies in place. Don't do what I did, because I had to restamp, colour and cut my cat again. For the background, I've cut a panel of Nina £80 with the largest decal panel die from the deckled paper hug set, and I'm securing that into place on my plum pudding panel. I quite like the way it looks on a bit of an angle though, so I've purposely offset it. I'm going to stamp a sub-sentiment, and I wanted it to go directly under my porcelain one, but I need to make sure that I leave enough space for the images too. So the easiest way to do this is to set out everything with the stamp in place and transfer that to the Misty, which will then let me be totally sure I'm stamping in the right place before I make that commitment. Then I'm stamping with VersaFine Onyx Black again. Now all that's left to do is adhering the rest of my elements. The sentiment takes up the most space and will determine where everything else goes, so naturally I'm going to glue that down first. I don't want to commit to any of the other placements without having everything set out, because there are quite a few elements to fit in here, so it'd be really easy to mess it up, and I really don't want to do that now, not so close to the finish line. I'm starting by adhering any images that will sit together to each other first. This plant actually went a little off base, so I'm trimming down that large white border at the bottom, and then I can add it to the little side table. I always like to add some dimension to my projects, so I'm going to be using a mixture of liquid glue and foam adhesive squares. So for my bookshelf, the books go onto the shelf with liquid glue. Then the kitty cat gets popped up on a layer of foam squares. I'm only exposing the adhesive on the squares that will sit directly onto the shelf at first, then adding foam squares to the shelf and books themselves, and that means that I'm going to need to add another layer behind the cat's head kind of area. Even my mistake isn't going to go to waste. I'm adding it behind my cat to give just a small amount of lift, and then the cute little fish goes right in her paw before I adhere that all to my panel. For the bottom images, I'm popping up the plant and table on foam adhesive, with the top of the plant just barely touching the bottom of my die cut sentiment. Then the cat and rug go straight onto the panel. That gives us several different levels, which creates a lot of interest in the little scene. This one did come out slightly different from the original, but they both came together in the exact same way. I really hope that some of these tips help you with your own colouring, and there's a visual supplies list, additional photos and some more details up on the Heffy Doodle blog. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I truly appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, all the things. Have a lovely, happy, safe and wonderful week. Stay crafty. Bye.